Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, hosted by Concept 3D. If you like our content, please follow and subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, and Google. My name is Shiro, and I'll be your host today. And we're going to be talking about a topic I love today, which is around the secret to building your personal brand on LinkedIn and the benefits that come with it. So as a guest, I have Jeff Doyle joining us today. Jeff is a higher ed leader with over 30 years of experience with a focus on student success and retention. He's currently working in the Division of Student Life with Southwestern University. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shiro. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. And so I do ask all my guests this. Jeff, tell us what you love about higher ed.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. Like when I was growing up, my father was a professor of botany and marine biology at a historically black college, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. And my mom was a reference librarian, and it was a house full of constant learning and growing. And I was on his campus. We lived 2 blocks from another university. And I learned and grew a lot, very much science focused. Biology myself is what my major was. I took a lot of math in high school. When I got to college, I just focused on my academics, and I was doing really well. But the end of my second year, I was miserable. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And someone was like, Jeff, what are you involved in outside the classroom? What have you connected to? And I was like, nothing really. I thought I was just supposed to get good grades. And so I tried out for the volleyball team my first 2 years, didn't make it. Made it my junior year and joined the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and started volunteering. And that just transformed my experience. I started building friendships with people that cared about me, that I cared about, and ultimately led to several leadership roles. And I was like, holy cow, I don't think I want to go to med school. I think I want to work with college students and help them navigate the same challenges I made. You know, one of the quotes I use is that people often actively master what they passively suffer. And so I've been blessed the last 30 years to work with college students and help them find what they connect to outside the classroom and grow through that.
Amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. I know yesterday I was on Reddit reading just a random Ask Reddit question, which is like, is anyone else feeling burnt out? And one of the top responses was like, I felt this way, and I won't describe what they were burnt out about, but I shifted into higher ed, and now I feel like my job has a purpose. And that was the first comment at the very, very top to the response for feeling burnt out. And I was like, okay, this is great. And that's why I love this podcast, right? I get to talk to people who are really mission driven and focused. So appreciate that.
It's awesome that you're doing this, and you've got some great episodes out there that I listen to in advance. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, let's jump in, Jeff. Tell me a little bit more about your background and your role.
Sure. So yeah, once I figured this out, what I wanted to do, I was like, oh, there's a graduate program to study this. So I got a master's degree in counseling with a focus on college students, and ultimately got a PhD several years later in the study of how universities work and are run. And I've been blessed to work at some small public universities for 4 years, small private universities for 7 years. I've been at several big privates. Baylor I was at for 9 years as dean of students, and some big publics. I was at University of Virginia for 9 years, Appalachian State for 7 years, mainly in student affairs, but I've done a lot in academic affairs also. Oversaw a leadership minor. I've taught in the School of Business and Education, and I've worked with accreditation and assessment. So I've been on campuses of 10 universities, helping them improve how they think about their learning outcomes and their efficiency and effectiveness. So, I've also taught some graduate courses in higher ed, which was really fun. I taught some finance in higher ed, administration, organization. And so being able to sit in a classroom and talk with other people about that is really enjoyable.
Well, it sounds like we're gonna have to do like 10 episodes together because there's a lot here, right? There's a lot to
Yeah.
digest. But let's jump into one specific topic then. I know, after connecting with you on LinkedIn, you've really built up your network and your own personal brand within LinkedIn specific to higher ed. Can you tell me a little bit more about that journey and what it's led to?
Sure. Yeah, I think until it was almost 50, I had just poured myself into my profession at my job. Institutional loyalty is important to me. I mean, I've presented probably, I think I had like 70 conference presentations and 20 something articles, but mainly I was poured into my university. But I ended up leaving my dean role at Baylor. And, at that point I'd had like a $50 million budget and hundreds of full-time and student staff working for
Wow.
me. And I took a bit of a step down to go into an area with almost no budget and no staff. I was facing some family challenges that I needed to focus on too. And so I was a bit discouraged, and I said, "Well, what can I do? I think I'm capable of more, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that right now in this role." I tried to, but then
Hmm.
I started learning, like, hey, there's this whole world out there of LinkedIn. And I'd always just ignored anything LinkedIn related because I didn't understand it. But then people were like, this is a community where you can get out and learn a lot and contribute a lot. And so I just started getting involved in that and reading about it and creating my own profile. And so it's been through probably 100 iterations since then. And I try to think about it as, how do I build friendships and connections? It's not as much about how am I going to make more money or navigate using people to get another step up the ladder, but how do I be authentically me in an environment that positively impacts other people? When I connected to people, I waited till I found someone interesting. What I do on campus is, if I hear someone name more than twice, I write it down, and then I ask them if they'd like to go get coffee or a drink or something and just get to know them. So I started doing the same thing with LinkedIn. And I kept a list. I'm very, you know, organized, let's say, would be a nice way of saying that. And
Hmm.
so I've got this list even today of over 750 people that I've met with in the last few years. I got all their LinkedIn accounts and a little bit about what I've learned from each one. And so I try to see each person as a gift that's going to teach me something to help me be a better person. The other thing I've done with LinkedIn is, when I grew up, my father, every morning he would get up at 4 or 5 a.m. and read the Washington Post, and he would circle articles that he thought I should read to learn more about. And he'd leave them on the table so when I came down for breakfast, I could read them, which wasn't always at the top of my list. I was getting into the sports section was my first priority. But at dinner, then he would be like, okay, so who read the articles I put out on the table this morning? My sister was also a part of this. But as the older one, I felt like I took the brunt of it. What did you learn today in school? And what did you learn from those articles? And so somehow I became that same annoying person in my jobs where I was finding articles and sharing them with other people. It started out, I would circulate them physically through offices where people would check they'd seen it.
Hmm.
Then I started emailing it, and it got to the point where people were like, "Oh my gosh, stop sending articles." And I was like, "Oh, I've become my dad." So on LinkedIn, I learned you can post articles and not push them in anybody's face. They can choose if they want to read it. And so it's
Right.
honestly this beautiful combination of what I care about, which is sharing things I'm learning and allowing other people to learn from them without annoying them. So I typically will try to schedule 2 or 3 posts a day. So LinkedIn just started allowing scheduling a post 3 or 4 years ago, and that's just great. So I might read for a couple hours on the weekend and schedule 8 or 9 posts and spread them out and just get excited to see what people say about them.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you did there. I noticed that you had broken down one of my episodes with Seth Odell on the campus visit and how it shifted. And you basically took away both of our key takeaways from a 50-minute conversation. You broke it down into maybe a 2-minute read, right? And so you're pretty much doing everyone's job for them, like, which is like you're breaking down these long pieces of format and and conveying them in short format and making it more digestible. So that's amazing. And it looks like your father prepped you for this LinkedIn boom. I don't know however many years ago, but that's magical. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that he did for me was he helped me learn to write more effectively too. So I started sharing things about who I was and putting them on a website, and then often linking that to LinkedIn also. So I have a hub. One of the things I really care about is in my mission statement. It's about my mission statement is focused on excellence, fun to be with, faithful in all things, and live every day like it could be my last. And so I've got this thing about leaving a legacy where, just last week, the University Southwestern, our associate vice president for human resources, 45 years old, 2 kids, and a wife, suddenly died on campus. And we were just in shock. Tomorrow we have the funeral. And so we'll be going there. But, you know, it could be our last day at any point. And so I asked myself, what do I do today? What do I leave behind after I go? And so I created this website where I just put the things I care most about. And a lot of it is higher ed related, student success, higher ed. I also have got, stories of my family. I've got how I make tough decisions ethically, my mission statement in life, how I think people should clarify their purpose. And then I can tie that into LinkedIn and share it with other people. So it takes what's often in our heads and makes it explicit too. So when someone asks me something, it's got my favorite movies on it, my favorite TV shows, my favorite podcasts, and I can just say, well, this is what I care about, if you want to know more about me.
Yeah, no, and could you share the website as well, by the way?
Sure. It's Deep Thoughts, HED, so highered.com. And I'm not out to monetize. I don't really try to drive a lot of traffic to it. I just put it out there, and it's almost as much for me at this point in life as it's about my legacy. So, I mean, not that I want to focus on me being remembered, but I'm like, if I have things to give to this world, maybe I could stick them here in case, I'm not here and they can go back and look at it.
Yeah, Jeff, I think what you've done here is fabulous. I've thought of doing something similar as well, because there's periods in your career and job that you take on tough challenges or new things, and you learn how to do something, right? So my most recent example is I planned a kickoff for a company for this year, 2024, in January. Never done it before, and I figured out, what was hard. I created a template, all these things, right? But now that just lives in my head. And if I want to recreate the wheel, I might have to start, a little bit further down. But if I had, made a blog post about it, I could have documented all my thoughts and, started from 90, 80% and kept going. So it's almost like a great way to build your portfolio. Not that it's intended for that reason, but it does have positive outcomes in the future, I think.
And it's how the human race has evolved over time, quite honestly. When you look at the growth of intelligent living creatures, it's when we started writing things down and communicating things. And so now we can go back thousands of years, and those messages are continued on. So we build on each other. I have a page on my website called The Shoulders I Stand On, which is basically like 75, 80 people that I could not be who I am today without them. So it's my thank you to these people, that who I am is built on the shoulders of the people who went before me.
That's amazing. Shout out to everyone on that list. I do want to ask, so specific to LinkedIn and the network you've built, I know your intention was to network, right? Make more friends and learn from it, but what are some outcomes that had come from all of that work? And you have, I don't know however many thousand connections now, but can you tell us a little bit more about some of those outcomes?
Yeah, it's interesting because I thought it might lead to a job, and it will at some point. I mean, I've got a great job right now, and I've had some other jobs at universities. But I think what I've gotten most out of it is just meaningful connections and some external positive reinforcement. So if I see somebody in town, they'll say, "Oh my gosh, I follow you on LinkedIn. You've got all this great stuff." So I'm like, well, I guess that's my TikTok, or my Twitter. LinkedIn is where I'm giving things. So I love hearing people say that. Some people have reached out, and after I did something last week, 4 or 5 people reached out and said they wanted to meet with me and talk to me and pick my brain. I've had a couple CEOs of companies say they follow me and they want to get to know me better. And so all those things have been great, and I'm hoping at some point it opens a door to a job working with universities on a larger scale. But at this point, it's like I'm just going to keep doing what I believe is a good thing, and giving knowledge and what I care about away, and then trust the process here.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, ultimately, that's what connected us too. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
really a powerful tool.
yeah.
All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit to, publishing your thoughts and writing them down, right? One of the topics I wanted to cover as by the time this episode is published, right? We're probably going to be about a month into fall semester. And I think a big need during that period is really understanding student needs and that first month, first year experience, and
Hmm.
trying to fit those student needs. And you shared your website with us, right? And you had an article on the hierarchy of needs for student success. We actually, completely unrelated, published a pyramid for student success on a very similar topic of student needs. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what you believe is really important during those first few weeks, as well as longer term for student retention?
Sure. And I'd like to say that I think what I've presented in my piece is it's not groundbreaking, but it is based on the extensive research of thousands of other people over the years, and I just tried to simplify it in the hierarchy of needs. And folks can go and take a look at it if they want. The piece I really wanted to mention here today is the one that I think surprises most people. They think, oh, obviously I got to have enough money to go to college, and I've got to get good grades. But the piece that is often overlooked is the social connection piece. You heard my story at the start. Well, at Baylor, we took like 100 variables that we thought could make a difference. And myself and the president of another university today, we were co-leading a team on university retention. And we
Mhm.
said, let's just work with institutional research each year, and we're going to run these regression algorithms and see which of these 100 variables makes the greatest impact. And so over the course of 5 years, we shortened those variables down till we got to like 20 to 30. And we kept finding this one variable was like almost 5 times more predictive than anything else. And it surprised some people. And I think when you hear it, you'll recognize it. But it was, we asked students in weeks, sometime between weeks 3 and 6, do you feel like you belong at this institution? And if they said no, that was 5 times more predictable that in 11 months later, they would not be a student at our school. So if
Right.
if they don't connect at the beginning of that school year, they won't be there the following year. I mean, I'm not saying all the time, but it was the most predictive question. So then you start to work backwards. How do we create belonging early on? So one of the things that we did at Baylor was I hired a guy that basically was an expert in communicating with students. And we created this incoming student Facebook page. They often emerge just naturally, but we said, let's foster this. And so we started plugging admitted students in. And then we hired some students that we really liked and said, your job is to foster and facilitate positive communication and share things that are going to help these students be successful. So you could call it a little bit sneaky, but we just saw it as it's already happening. They're using it to sell all this stuff, which we don't want. It's helping someone else, and we want to help them. So we ended up having that. The other thing we did, and this is harder for some schools to do, but there's this concept called extended orientation. And it started at A&M, Texas A&M. It was called Fish Camp. At Baylor, it's called Line Camp. But we bring students in for multiple days in the summer without their
Mm.
parents. And we build this sense of unity. They learn about institutional history. They learn about becoming friends with each other. They learn the school traditions and songs, and they stay in these small groups of males and females where they get to know each other on a much deeper level. So when you come to the start of the school year, what you used to always see at most schools is deer in the headlights, like, holy cow, what am I
Yeah.
going to do? And you'd actually lose a lot of students. Within the first 24 hours, most colleges I've worked at have lost, probably 1% of their students because they just freak out. But what you see at schools that have this program is their messaging. After that ends, which is often in July, through August, they're all like, I can't wait to see you again. I want to see you. And they get to campus and they're in all these little groups. And so we've facilitated a connection that made them really excited to come back. And we know the students who attended that, based on the research we had done, were much more likely to stay. So you've got some preschool things you could do. Now, if you're not doing either of those, people talk about a welcome week or whatever that week is before school starts. And universities will often put on a bunch of events and have these sessions, which are all great. But you know what makes the biggest difference is if you do that with small group leaders. These students can learn. I mean, we can learn a lot, but if we don't feel like we're cared for or that we're connected, it's not going to make a big difference. So if you're going to have these events, that's great. But they around those events, they meet with their small groups. And we have student leaders that facilitate that. And they ask questions. Hey, what did you learn? We're going to go to this party, like an on-campus dance party together. Now we're going to go to the spirit rally together. And so in the midst of going to these, larger university events, which the research shows really don't have an impact on student success, but by connecting the students in this little pod of students, they're making friendships while going to these things.
Yeah, I've covered this question a few times with some guests that specifically work in student retention. And one thing they learned in a lot of their studies was like trying to get like the best artists to come for the concert, like the Welcome Week concert, and investing a lot of money and time. They did that a couple of years in a row, ran surveys. It like you said, it actually didn't have an impact. And where students really were looking for was more connection to faculty and smaller group organizations. And so what they did was, I believe, like you said, broke students into smaller pods, tried to find better student orientation leaders that were, either juniors or seniors. And then they also tried to create more opportunities for students to connect with faculty, even if they weren't going to be their professor, right? But just getting a chance to know the staff and faculty at the institution were priorities. And so that's right in line with what I've been hearing as well.
Yeah, there was a study, the Purdue Gallup study, you can look it up, came out in 2014 and 15, and they looked at over 300,000 people multiple years after college. And they said to these people, what was it about your college experience that had the greatest impact? And they compared the people who were loving their work and enjoying their jobs to those who were not enjoying their work and not satisfied with what they were doing. And they identified, I think they called it like the big six. But these 6 variables differentiated people who were satisfied in their careers versus those who weren't, based on college. And so those factors were, people taught me that were excited about what they were teaching me. People cared about me at my institution. I had someone reach out and try to mentor me at my institution. I joined a student group at my institution, and I was able to serve in a leadership role at my institution. Those 5 things, in fact, if they did all 5, I mean, they were just off the charts in how satisfied they were in their careers. And so in some ways, it's very rare to do post-college analysis multiple years out. So that's why I really love this study. We can go back and think, those students today, 10 years that graduate in 2024, the ones who did those 5 things likely are doing very well in life. So how do we help that happen? Like you just described, what do we do now to create an environment where those 5 things happen?
Yeah, that's great. And I know in the past conversation, I just had a webinar around orientation and welcome week. And I know Michigan Technological University has an event called An Afternoon in the Town, where they're a small college in a small town. And so they actually bring the students to like the main strip of town and introduced all the students to the local businesses, the business owners, some of the key businesses downtown, like the bank and stuff. Because a lot of times, if you're a freshman, it's the first time you're opening a bank. So they make all these connections, and it's one of the most upvoted events that they do during orientation and welcome week. And I'm wondering if, since you've been at many universities, have you seen some great examples at larger scale, smaller scale, mid scale universities that have really helped create that community and sense of belonging?
In that case, what makes a difference is a shared experience. So like at Baylor, when we would rent these buses, and we would drive on a 2-hour road trip to the place where Baylor was founded. And on the bus ride, we would do activities with them, where they're bonding. And like this year at Southwestern, we have something called Pirate Adventures, where we've got 90% of the freshman class signed up, and a bunch of people like me are going to take them on adventures. I'm taking 1 or 2 buses or vans to a water park. And, the focus in my mind, like I'm telling you, isn't like I need them to experience a water park. Is I want them to have fun with each other and build friendships. Someone else is doing like a history tour of town. I don't know all the activities, but they're going through a shared experience. This is why many schools that have great first year seminar programs will have their students go through a ropes course together. Again, it levels the playing field and takes away, people acting like they're better than someone or their car's fancier or whatever it may be. It puts you all on an equal level and says, let's tackle this challenge together, which creates a sense of hunger to connect with each other to help each other make it through that.
Shared experiences. Yep. I just realized as I was taking a step back and listening to your comment, this whole conversation today, whether it's around LinkedIn and building your personal brand, is all about forming connections and creating the right environment to do so. And maybe we need to go back and change the title because it seems to be the common theme of today. And I really like that.
Go back and look at the Harvard study. Have you heard of the oldest longitudinal study on human success? Definitely in our country, I think in the world. It was started, John F. Kennedy was in it. It was I don't know how many, couple hundred people. And every so many years, they're almost all died out now. They tested these people for all these health things and what they were learning. And they just said, who's going to live the longest? We've got all this stuff. Who lives the longest? Do you remember what the outcome was?
No, I do not.
That's exactly what you just told me. The people who live the longest weren't the healthiest. They didn't have the highest degree of education. They weren't the wealthiest. They were the ones who had the richest relationships with people around them. And you can see it. It's a TED Talk. It's a book. I mean, Robert Waldinger is the guy I think that published it. But basically, if we have quality relationships in our lives, we will live longer and be more satisfied in life. And so, I would just say maybe we take that as a point we could all walk out of here today with is how am I reaching out and fostering friendships with people that I want to invest in?
Yep. And that can be on LinkedIn, or that can be in your student life role or student success role or counseling role. Yeah, it definitely
Yep.
applies across the board. Well, Jeff, I think we're just at about time, but thank you so much for all of your knowledge share. I definitely think there's a lot of room for another episode here. I'm wondering where our listeners can follow up with you to learn more about what's going on in your world.
Sure. I mean, they can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. They can go to that website, deepthoughts.hed.com, HED standing for higher ed, or they can email me at jeff.doyle.923@gmail.com.
Great. Well, thank you again, Jeff. Thanks for joining our show. It's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work, man. Your website, your web podcast is great, and I've enjoyed it. So,
thank you.